About how I'm never late, and now I'm a minute late. Lord have mercy. Well, I look forward to seeing y'all today. We're having soul stories with Stacy. Grinch probably can steal my tissue later to put in his cage. And I have Grinch here. Yeah. And so what I am is I'm a mindset coach, a life on life's terms coach, and I look forward to gathering with you this morning. And we're going to talk about your belief system. We've talked about that this week. I usually, if you don't know me, I pick a topic each week and we kind of grow and expand upon that topic in our discussions for the week. So it's a great community that we have here. And so this week we've talked about your belief system and how it can be your internal map. Hello, Mr. Simon Vitter. How are you this morning? Have you had a good weekend? Well, I hope you've had a good weekend. So this talk will be good for you. I wish that when I was younger, I would have had somebody help me learn about my belief system because I was adamant. I used to have awesome. I'm good. Thank you very much. I used to have this t-shirt when I was a teenager that said, "My mind's made up. Don't confuse me with the facts." Hey, Epic, how are you? Woke up just in time for Stacy Renee. Thank you. Thank you for being here, Epic. I'm glad you woke up just in time for me because we're going to finish out this week. Grinch is back too. There's the Grinch. The Grinch. So eventually you all will have an online store and it will probably have a t-shirt that says Grinch's Fan Club featuring Stacy Renee, Mindset Coach. What do y'all think? Hey, McGlove, good morning. Well, I'm glad you get to be here for a few moments. So welcome. Thank you so much. So I hope you all have had an amazing weekend. Epic, just waking up. Do you drink coffee when you wake up, Epic? So, yeah. We're going to finish out our week with a story. It was Luke's suggestion, sorry. I took Luke's suggestion and I had a story. So if you didn't get to catch me Friday night, sometimes you might have to. You like the t-shirt idea? Thank you. Yeah. The goal is in November because I always have goals. It's midnight. Oh, no, you do not want coffee at midnight. No, you do not. Wow. So, the plan is to, I don't have coffee after 3 or 4. I think last night I got wild and had coffee at 5, but yeah. So, to have a website and an online store maybe in November. So that will be cool, right? And then if anyone wants these t-shirts, they can just order them, So welcome this morning. I'll get right to our topic today now that we're all here. The gang's here. What's going to be here? And there'll be some come in later. Maybe Angela, Pam, Kim. Everyone will come in later, but I'm just glad that we're here this morning. So thank you for being here this morning. So we're doing our soul stories with Stacy. I started calling it soul stories because my mom let me know that there's like 3 different people who have story time with Stacy. So we're doing soul stories. You're nocturnal these days? Okay, excellent. Thank you, Epic. Yeah. I will be when I get over to Europe. I'm going to be nocturnal because, I work with Americans. And so they're going to be like this time. And it's going to be like what you are is in the evening time. So when I'm over there, I'll be doing this over there in the evening time instead of the morning time. So we're going to talk about today about growing from unconscious survival to conscious navigation. Many of you know that as a mindset coach and life coach that my specialty, Angie T, good to see you this morning. I'm glad you made it. Thank you for the hearts. So, as a mindset coach, a life coach, my specialty, I'm not exclusive to because I am beginning to work with more and more couples, but with addiction, codependency, and grief. So all of that affects some of us in some sort of way. If we don't have any of that, somebody around us probably does, and we don't understand their whys. And we talked about your whys, W-H-Y apostrophe S, will make us wise, W-I-S-E, when we check those out. So that's where we're growing from unconscious survival, because some of us feel like we're just surviving, right, Angie? Good morning, Richard. So some of us feel like we're just surviving. And we just think, I can't even thrive. I can't even. And that's the old tape. That's the old belief system. So this is why we're talking about our belief systems being our internal map, because a lot of us think that our belief systems are indeed our reality. But if we change our belief system, we can change our reality. So we've been exploring, I have my notes here so that I can see your comments there. So please let me know if this relates to you. Epic couple's work must be hard. I've always found it easier to move on. Not everybody needs to move on. I work with some amazing couples. A lot of them have been together at least and above 13 years. So relationships can get stale. They require maintenance, especially when we're in them for that long, And so being able to still recognize, because a lot of times values weren't an important thing when some people got married way back when, is that some of the marriages just seemed like the right thing to do, or they thought they were in love, but they didn't love themselves. And so, yeah, it's like any relationship, it has to continue to grow. My relationship with myself, my source, and my cells always continues to grow. I'm not a couple yet, but it doesn't mean that I wouldn't be. But I do know what's meant for me now, rather than seeing what am I meant for. I'm not giving my power away. So once we don't give our power away, we're going to have less choices, because there's more folks out there who are willing to take your power away than there are to walk with you mutually. And so, when we get to be certain ages, especially, because people become conditioned. And those belief systems that I'm talking about, are some of our conditioning. So that's an unconscious survival to conscious navigation. Because that's what, when we're working with me, we grow through, is that, life is an adventure. And when we get to navigate our adventure, we don't feel like we're on Survivor. You know what I mean? That we're just having to pick up those bits and pieces, what we find in the jungle, forest, and woods, and just absorb that. We get to absorb. When we're navigating, we absorb what we want to absorb, and we let go of what we don't want. But it doesn't mean that we do it in a hateful and disgusting way. Hello, sync it. So we learn how to be kind to ourselves, because a lot of times we're not even kind to ourselves in these survival modes, as we do what we have to do to survive, but then we feel guilty, right? So that deals with our belief system. So I don't mean simply the things that we say we believe, because a lot of people say they believe in a lot of things that they're conditioned to believe in and to. And I'm not saying that it's just conditioning, but sometimes they have a central nervous system that's telling them something else than what they really believe. A lot of people may say that, I have faith, but then they're always questioning and fear and in doubting things. And it doesn't mean that they have a lack of faith. It means sometimes they've been conditioned to question and fear and doubt things. So a lot of our belief system was formed from the time we were 1 to 12 years old. And if we had people who, maybe questioned everything and we didn't feel encouraged. I mentioned last week that some people didn't know what support is their whole life. And one of the biggest assets that we have, and that the people that I work with have, is we usually talk about support. Support is so important. Support and encouragement. We talked, was it Friday night, about the relationships, about how we'll know the difference between what's healthy and supportive and not. Epic. Never watch what people say, watch what they do. Absolutely. And it needs to be in alignment. When I'm talking about alignment, this is when our words and our actions match. But a lot of us in these belief systems were taught things that didn't make sense, and we never questioned it. Like when we say, I'm hoping for the best, but expecting the worst. So that's imbalanced, don't you think? When you think about that, isn't that imbalanced? I'm hoping for the best, but expecting the worst, because you're not going towards what you want. You're not growing towards what you want. You're just hoping and giving that power to somebody else. That's my interpretation of it. Does anybody else have another interpretation of it? So our belief system, and I don't mean simply the things that we say we believe, once again, I'm talking about the deeper beliefs that have become a part of how we interpret ourselves. That's our perceptions, other people, and the circumstances in the world around us. We have data in the back of our mind. We always say, oh, this is in the back of my mind. We have all this data in our brain. And so it's like, oh, and what we see with our eyes, hear with our ears, smell with our nose, taste and touch and say with our mouth. And some of the things we say with our mouth is that has been repeated for years and years, like hoping for the best and expecting the worst. We took that on without questioning, what does that mean? And is that really what I want to do? I don't want to hope for the best and expect the worst. What we're doing is we're already preparing ourselves for failure. So there's a part in our mind that says failure, like it's an important thing or something. Failure is not that important. Everybody fails sometimes. The light bulb inventors failed at first. A lot of people fail at first. It's not really that important. I find that most people, when pressed on beliefs, have very little grounding for them. If you can't measure it, you likely don't believe it. I know, right? That's when we say expecting the best and hoping for the worst. You got to believe to achieve. The coffee mugs and so that's where our belief system goes, is you got to believe to achieve. Things like this, because you do. I talked about the candles on Friday night, the magic, mystery, and miracles. You have to believe. And a lot of people think that that's woo-woo, but when Walt Disney says it, nobody thinks it's woo-woo. When you wish upon a star, and y'all know I wish upon the stars. I light my candles. It's not just for birthdays do we make wishes and blow the candles out. This is a thing, what we believe. So our internal map, we started on Monday by looking at the map. Thank you, Epic, for that. We started on Monday by looking at the map itself. We don't always recognize that we're using one. That's when we're in survival mode, it's just we're anticipating and strategizing. Most of the people that I meet with, I had a new client yesterday, is we're anticipating and we're strategizing what's going to happen next, expecting the worst, right? So when we're moving towards expecting the worst all the time, like Epic says, is that our actions speak louder than our words do. Because if we say, oh, I'm hoping for the best, but our energy, we talked about intention and motivation, but our energy has the energy of expecting the worst. When I'm teaching people how to set boundaries, because we didn't learn boundaries growing up, many of us. And so when I'm teaching people how to set boundaries, I suggest to them, when they don't feel comfortable saying no at first, saying to somebody, I don't know, let me think about it. A lot of people just go into the panic at first and they don't realize that we can say, I don't know, let me think about it. And you look the person in the eyes. But a lot of people, when I'm working with them and I say, hey, what about if you say, I don't know, let me think about it. And I have them do it to practice, because everything is about practice and development. Anything new is going to feel uncomfortable at first. And then when, at first they may say, I don't know, let me think about it, because even just the idea of it. But you see the body language in that? You see how what Epic's saying, when your actions and your words match. So there's a different, when your actions and words match. So when you say, I don't know, let me think about it, you still look insecure, don't you? You still look like you're expecting the worst, right? But when you say, I don't know, let me think about it, that looks more powerful, right? You're setting in your power. So this is why your actions and your words need to match, rather than, I'm hoping for the best, but expecting the worst. Because your body language is going to show, I'm expecting the worst. But yeah, hoping for the best, but expecting the worst. That's usually how people are like, Epic, I've left my last 3 partners because they couldn't set boundaries, because they couldn't say no, impossible to trust, right? Yeah. So a lot of people are afraid to set those boundaries. Sweet, but too sweet, right? I know. And then they feel like, and I know the feeling, because I used to be the sweet, but too sweet, Good morning, Ashley. It's good to see you. I'm glad that you're here. If this content resonates with you, please feel free to like and subscribe. So, yeah, I didn't know how to set boundaries. I used to be a doormat, and I used to feel like I did everything for everybody that they wanted me to do. And then they would still leave, like Epic. And I don't blame you, because that's really giving a person too much power. And that power feels overwhelming, doesn't it, Epic? It feels like they're building an obligation. I'm doing good, Ashley. How are you? So it feels like we're building an obligation. And I talked to somebody this morning, as a matter of fact, and we've talked about this the other week, about how when people tell us they sacrifice for us for love, and many people, their belief system, thank you, Ashley. Lots of love to you too. When Mark, good morning, Dr. Mark, how are you? So when many people's belief system taught them that they had to sacrifice for love, what they're really doing is building obligation, right? Because we want somebody to love us back that much. That's what it is. And if we're honest with ourselves, and we talked about being honest with ourselves. Well, I'm glad you got excited news. So I love your comments. Thank you for letting me know that you're here, Dr. Mark and Ashley. You can tell us about your news, but I got my notes here so we stay on topic, and I'm mindful of everybody's time and experience here. Okay? All right. So we can move through our lives believing that we're simply responding to reality. Because a lot of times I know in my catastrophizing and in my old belief systems, I thought that was my reality. I told a client yesterday, I said, you know what? My therapist told me, Stacy, can't you imagine anything good happening? And I was like, oh, I don't have an imagination. And that was because I lost, and it's been proven, I talked about this book yesterday too, is that when we are startled, and childhood trauma is a variety of things. It's not just the obvious. We talked Friday night about how when we feel put down and we tend to give up on our hopes and dreams because we got put down by one person, and it wasn't that our talents and gifts, we talked about talents and gifts, and it's not that your talents and gifts are no longer there and that you don't have them. It's that we give up on them because somebody put them down. So that's when we start giving our power away. And usually it's probably before the age of 12. You draw something as a kid and someone says, well, that's not so good, is it? Then the kid quits drawing. Hi, Chancha, I'm good. How are you? So then the kid quits drawing. It doesn't mean that the kid can't draw. It just means that that person got the power. And so that kid has learned not to express themselves. And so this is what, we think that as adults we learn how to express ourselves, and we think that what power looks like is something being thrown off or something like this. A lot of times is we think that it's a rigidity, right? Epic. That's where my only belief lies. Either life's happening to you or you're happening to life. I think life's happening to us, but it behooves us to believe otherwise. And sometimes life does happen to us. The childhood wounds, or these wounds that we've experienced, are real, but a lot of times we think that we're just over them when we say I'm over them. And this is where our belief systems and that alignment, doesn't come in clearly when we are saying one thing, but then our body language and our actions are saying another thing. So it's about more than just the things we say we believe, because, we can have this inner turmoil. Dr. Mark, what you were saying is so very true and genius. Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you, Dr. Mark. I appreciate your comments and your input always. So thank you. So being able to be in that alignment with ourselves, to be able to step into who you truly are, because we had these gifts when we were born. You were born worthy, valuable, and divine. But as time goes on, we realize, okay, our parents at first are our gods, and then we start going to church and we understand that God is God. Then we start going to school and we got other people's parents and other people's God's input, and so we don't feel like enough. A lot of the people that I work with don't feel like enough, and I know I didn't feel like enough. So I totally understand that. At one time, I did not feel like enough. You're a nursing officer? Okay, thank you, Chanchel. So Anunda Dana. Sometimes I remember what my mother told me when I was in her womb. Oh, that's cool. People have written songs about this. This is when my baby shot me down, bang, bang. You shot me down, bang, bang. I hit the ground, bang, bang. This is about a person's emotions. Yeah. Songs are very interesting about how they guide us. I talked about, last other week that I used to have my first love, and I was conditioned in my life to, be attracted to people who are emotionally unavailable. And a lot of people were taught to be emotionally unavailable. And so it's all about the unlearning and the unwinding of these old belief systems that don't serve us, that when we can't connect with people and we're wondering why, and we think that it's us, and it is us, but it's also what we choose. So we talked about last week if your picker was broken. Good morning, other beautiful lady. It's good to see you this morning. So we talked about last week if your picker was broken, and really, I don't even believe we are broken. I have to argue. I've told y'all I have my fights with AI, because AI will be trying to say these cliche things, throw it into whatever I'm writing, and I'm like, my people are not broken. Y'all are not broken. You see, we don't know what we know until we know. But sometimes we may title ourselves, I'm just broken. I'm broken. My picker's broken. Everything's broken. I'm just a broken person. And that might be the belief system. But that's not who you are. You were born worthy, valuable, and divine. Just like I said, we just forget when we present our talent and somebody says, really? And then we think that I'm not talented, but it doesn't mean that you're not talented just because somebody else can't appreciate it, you know? So it's like we have a saying in recovery, get in where you fit in. So we talked about, thank you for the hearts. I appreciate y'all's input. That's why I have my notes here, because then we can talk a little bit. I can read the notes and then we can discuss them. So y'all are amazing. Thank you. So I told you on Monday we started by looking at the map itself, the internal map. This also, Kim has worked with me, on our internal pathways. We don't realize, we are not just, when we have science and biology and we have those papers, right, Dr. Mark? We are not just these pictures on the paper. That's not just a picture on the paper. This is how we internally work. And we are amazingly designed. And our body is always telling us something, hence like the body keeps the score, and I keep losing my train of thought. This is why I have notes, because I'll see the comment and I'll be thinking, I'm going to comment something about what that says. Hey, Galileo. Well, okay, thank you. So we can move through our lives believing that we're simply responding to reality, and when we're responding to the meaning we've given our experiences. See, that's what separates us from our body, is our mind goes into overdrive thinking about the meaning that we give to experiences, and usually the sabotage begins with the body. As we walk on the path of life, sometimes we're physically, emotionally, spiritually damaged and injured. This is why we have to use the tensile strength and our spiritual strength to get us up. I am not a science teacher, Galileo, spiritual kind of. But yes, exactly. When I'm working with people, I tell them we're building mental muscles and emotional stamina, because a lot of people, we do need to move our bodies. That action is so important. Actions, like Epic says, speak louder than words. And our intentions and motivations, many of us weren't taught what our intentions and motivations are. I was not. So our thoughts and expectations, fears and assumptions, owning those things, and beliefs. But half the time we don't own those things. Half the time we're taught to project that out to somebody else, what they believe, what they assume. Thank you, Epic. What their fears are. We're too worried trying to protect their fears that we aren't even acknowledging what our own fears are, but we're running on those fears. So this is also not congruent with what we're trying to create, what we're trying to navigate. That's just part of the survival mode. So, all right, Colleen, I'm glad that you're here, but we don't talk about religion, politics, my age, or dating status. So I hope that you're able to get something out of what we are talking about. Our thoughts, expectations, fears, assumptions, and beliefs help determine what we notice, those perceptions. I'm really feared to talk to girls in confidence. Really? I wonder why. So, these have us in survival mode. The beliefs that determine what we notice, what we anticipate, what we avoid, what we pursue, and sometimes even what we believe is possible for us. That puts us in survival mode. You may notice that your tips and tricks. Well, just listen up here, Galileo, and maybe you'll learn something here, because really it's about being yourself is the thing with girls. It's just being yourself, because then you're going to attract the right people to you. And I understand that a lot of people want to, I used to mold myself into the person, oh, they're a really great person. Look at what I attracted. Look what I attracted. And then like 9 years later, it's like, look what I attracted. Look what I attracted. So it's all about those perceptions that turn to perspectives, and being grateful is a really important part. We talked about that at the end of last week. So some of those beliefs are so familiar that we don't experience them as beliefs anymore. We think that that's our reality when we're anticipating and strategizing somebody cheating on us, somebody not noticing us, somebody ignoring us, somebody rejecting us. These are expectations. Those are not reality necessarily. But a lot of people think it's intuition because that's what they expect. And intuitions and expectations are two different things. So we experience these things as truth, these letdowns, because we keep feeling let down, let down, let down. And that's where living in default can begin, to where we're just trying to strategize and survive through this life. Dr. Mark, it's most times easier said than accomplished. You have to believe in yourself and then let someone else stop believing in you. Huh. I don't know. I didn't believe in myself when I first got in recovery as an addict, a recovering addict. And I have 29 years clean and sober, and I did not believe in myself. And I really, frankly, I only got sober because I didn't want to hurt my kids or somebody else. I didn't care, really. I didn't love myself when I was in my addiction. Galileo. Well, hope you'll keep listening to the topic today, Galileo. And if you have ideas for a topic, and I don't know about boosting memory, I'm in an age where I hide things. I can't hide things anymore because I'll forget where they are. So I can't help you there. To be totally honest and transparent, I'm not going to tell you I can do things I cannot do. So, Dr. Mark, it is sometimes easier said than accomplished, but you have to believe in yourself and then let someone else start. For me, at work, the opposite is there was people who believed in me. You know, there's a saying in our recovery, and I believe that for you, Dr. Mark. But in recovery, you know, like I said, I specialize in addiction, recovery, codependency, and grief. And it's not just addiction to drugs or alcohol, addiction to food. Food is the most addictive thing out there. And then fantasy is even more addictive than that, because even I romanticize and fantasizing about somebody else's life, and we are not measuring up to that life. Most of the time, that's romanticizing and fantasizing. So I find Mark derails the conversation quite a bit, honestly. Well, it's his belief. And so we respect all beliefs here. We do. We do. It's just that, yes, I am sitting near a parrot. You love Xanax? Well, I hope you don't get addicted to Xanax. If you do, I'm here as a mindset coach or mental health. So in my addiction, there's a saying that says, yeah, there's a saying that's in recovery that says, you know, I have faith in someone who believes in me and wants to help me in my recovery, because sometimes these are learned behaviors. And if I want to learn to stop using, if I want to learn to stop giving people, places, power, and things, you know, people, places, and things my power, I have to see people who learned not to give people, places, and things their power. And that's why I get on here, because I know the value of that. That's why I get on here. Yes, 29 years. And so it wasn't just the drugs. It wasn't just the alcohol. It wasn't just the food. It was my beliefs underneath that had me coping, you know, because what I had to survive. A lot of us have survivor stories. It's not that they don't exist. I know you have a survivor story, Dr. Mark. Good morning, G's Jaded Wasted. I'm good. How are you, darling? So we all have survivor stories. But we talked Friday night about villains and victims. You know, do we want to give that villain the power anymore? And so healing requires us to put that villain in prison. And that villain sometimes is our own thinking, because when you combine all those things, you know, the parents being your God when you're first born, because we have no concept of God, but you were born holy and healthy and happy and, you know, divine. There's nothing wrong with you when you're born. Everybody gets excited when you're born and you're just brought into the world, but then the world happens, right? And that's just our humanness. We're going to make mistakes. I talked a while ago about failure. You know, we're going to make mistakes. That's human. And so that sometimes, though, mistakes created these belief systems, and that's what we're too focused on. So if we want to go from survival mode to navigation of knowing what we do want rather than trying to not have something happen, because that's where a lot of people are put their energy to. I know that for me, that was my survival mode that I thought was reality, and that's why I like to share this, and to where we can navigate to where we want to go and grow. Because we can sit on the couch all day and be in dream world like I used to be in my addiction. But then, getting up and learning how to put action forth. Because if I wanted to stay, first off, I wasn't going anywhere if I stayed in my addiction. And we know that with food, it's the same way. When people are addicted to food, they eventually sometimes get so big they can't even get out of the house if they wanted to. I work with people who have had problems getting on the airplane without extenders, and things like this. And there's nothing wrong with them, except that that's usually how we attack ourselves with self-sabotage, is it affects our physical body. That's why I do what I do. And I get to grow too, because, if we don't move it, we'll lose it, is one thing. And when we move our body, our mind is going to move too. But when we also have to move our mind to get our body to move. So that's the intentions and motivations and being able to be guided to what we want. So in addiction recovery is if I want to be thinner so I can go on a plane, I have to quit eating ice cream every evening. I have to quit doing certain things. But that doesn't mean that I don't focus on what I want. I change my habits. So that's where we begin living on default. Default mode means that we keep doing the same thing, that insanity, expecting different results. Not because we're incapable of making choices, because we are smart. We've been trying to prove we're smart all the time. Proof and intention and motivation are not the same things. I talk about that because a lot of us in this default mode are trying to prove our worth. We're trying to prove our importance. Yes, I'm okay, Ashley. Thank you. And we're trying to prove certain things. And so we're not knowing what our intention and motivation is because we're too busy trying to anticipate and strategize what somebody else wants or expects out of us. Because a lot of us grew up in that feeling of somebody expecting something out of us. So we try to live up to that, and we develop our own expectations. Where and when and to whom we are born, we have no choice, but as we grow and walk on the path, we can take charge of our life. Absolutely, we can take charge of our life. We have to make that conscious decision, though. See, that's where the unconscious that we're talking about today and the consciousness comes together. Is a lot of times for some of us, we learn the hard way. I know I learned the hard way, and until I get sick and tired of being sick and tired, used to be. Now I learned. Each time I did something new and different, I learned to get excited about it. So that's what we do. Ashley, I'm staying on topic, okay? So I hope that this is beneficial, but if you have questions, would you please put it on topic, what I'm talking about, okay? All right. Thank you for being here. So, it's about learning to make our choices, not depending on what somebody else expects of us, not what somebody else is going to do, but making our choices that align with us. And then when we make our choices that align with us, those that are supposed to be our friends will be our friends. Those that are supposed to be our partners will be our partners. The things that we're supposed to do, we'll get to do. Because, if we don't get in our body too, our body will take the hit. We will sabotage if we're living in default. Because we don't think about our body. We're just thinking about somebody else and their body. We may think about our self-image and self-loathing. That may have been a learned behavior too. So we are capable, and you've proved you're capable. People prove that they're capable. So we are capable. Good morning, Bernard. It's good to see you this morning. When we're trying to live up to others' expectations, we are proving that we're capable, but are we believing it? Most people that call themselves people pleasers, when they get complimented back for what they do, they don't believe it because they're not doing it from their heart and their own intention and motivation. They're doing it to prove something. And as long as they're doing it to prove something, it's hard for them to, envelop it, to embrace it, that they've done it. And that's where we realize that we are capable, but if our belief system somewhere underneath is that we're not capable and we're trying to prove that we are, the proof isn't in the pudding. We're always gathering evidence. So we're going to always, if we're looking for evidence that we're not capable, we're going to keep finding evidence that we're not capable. And so it's about understanding that why I'm doing this with my intention and motivation and then I'm going to do what I want to do. And then people, when somebody does something with me, I'm not going to say, oh, they're just doing that, right? Then I'm going to know, okay, if I'm doing what I want to do, then I'm going to know that they're going to do what they're wanting to do, and it's not going to feel like an obligation, but obligation could have been a learned behavior and part of your belief system. So we asked on Wednesday, who drew your map? We went that step further. The more often you accentuate the positive aspects of your life, you will eliminate the negatives, right? We have to know where we want to grow, right, Dr. Marcus? You've got to know where you want to grow. You can't just intellectualize yourself out of this. You have to put that action forth, and it's just one action. It doesn't have to be grandiose. This is where a lot of people give up, is they want it to happen right away, and it's these small actions every day that lead us where we are today. And when we look back, when we learn to have a self-esteem, when we learn that we are capable, when we learn to be in our minds, bodies, and souls, we learn that I'm not where I was 10 years ago, but am I where I wanted to be 10 years ago? Learn to navigate more so than to just survive. Other people were just surviving, and we're going to be where we thought they expected us to be, or where we just settled to be because of those expectations. Yes, Binod, people pleasing is going to backfire and hurt your peace if it doesn't get your expected response. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, where did we get this information, this programming, this survival skills? And, a lot of people talk about what they went through growing up, but did they heal from it? Because when we look at what's happening now and what happened then, am I still acting on those survival skills? What do I want? Am I just trying to navigate life and living life on default, like this is just the way that it is, but I want something else. I'm hoping for the best, but expecting the worst. And we get through life. Sometimes we get the best, but we're still going to keep saying hoping for the best and expecting the worst. And as long as we say that, that's the way life is going to go. So these information that we got, some of it came from our families, is what we talked about Wednesday, caregivers, from religion, culture, school, friendships and relationships, all the combination of which experiences that made an impression on us. So some of it came from what people said that stopped us. Some of it came from what people did and did not do that stopped us from sharing our gifts and talents and our authenticity and genuineness. So some came from what they didn't say. One step at a time, one day at a time. Absolutely, Dr. Mark. So our nervous system was also learning along the way. So your nervous system, we talked about in my Thursday night group on Facebook. I have a subscription on Facebook if you all are interested in seeing me on the Zoom, because I know somebody in here indicated that, I thought we were going to get to interact, where we could see each other. And I don't know how to do that on here. But on the Zoom, on Facebook, I have a subscription. And then with this subscription, I give 2 group coaching sessions a month on Thursdays. Epic. I think expecting the worst is just a note of, exactly. It's like, okay, we're not congruent. We're not in alignment, as they call it. Hoping for the best, but expecting the worst. Harmony is in between, where, this or something better was what I learned when I'm like applying for a job or doing something. This or something better, So that's the better way to go than hoping for the best but expecting the worst. It's this or something better. Because sometimes if we're connected to our source, and it could be God, it could be the universe, whoever that's your relationship with your source. But when we're connected to source, sometimes source's plans for us are better than our own plans for ourselves. Source, we may be preparing higher than we think we are, preparing for a higher level. And so this is where a lot of times people may say, it's imposter syndrome. But no, you're prepared. You just haven't prepared your mind yet for it. But you've done what you needed to do to get there. That's the thing. So when we don't recognize our nervous system, that's where we're anticipating and strategizing. That's where I was anticipating and strategizing, was I had to get to learn and know my nervous system so that I didn't sabotage my body. Because my nervous system is in my body. This is in your respiratory system, your digestive system, and your cardiovascular system. It's not up here in your head, but what happens in your head affects what happens down here through your amygdala. So it's running, you got a lot of things running the show that you don't even know. So epic. If you expect the best, you may be let down. If you're prepared for the worst, you can keep cracking on with what you're trying to get what you want, though. But it's not in alignment. I like the this or something better when I'm trying to achieve something. This or something better. Because we're always doing things, and sometimes we're doing better than we think we are. This is why it's good to have a support group or a coach, because a lot of times we don't see our progress. And we need to be reminded of it by people who can see our progress. Not everybody's going to see your progress. This is why it's the giving other people your power is a hard thing. While I'm talking about support, is people who have walked your path know how hard it is. But how many of us have these people giving armchair advice off their intellect, sitting there, like, well, you ought to do this, but they clearly aren't living the life. I've had them do it. People tell me what I need to be doing, and they aren't even living the kind of life I want to live. They don't have. So there's people that will do that. So that's not support. There's people that will should on you all day, every day, what you should be doing, what you should not be doing. That is not support, So it's about understanding, because a lot of us didn't know what support was. We supported everybody else. Binod, yes, counseling from Walking the Walk with You genuinely is also helpful. Thank you, Binod. I appreciate that. Yeah, because I try to help people get out of their minds and trying to figure, this stuff out, because I used to try to figure everything out too, but it was paralyzing. Paralyzing. I don't know if anybody else here feels like that. And sometimes that's like where we go into that flight, fight, and freeze. We shut down. Or, and a lot of us shut down is the easiest, because if you don't like conflict and confrontation, then we just shut down, because a lot of times we deserve more than we give ourselves credit for. Sometimes we've already earned positions that we haven't stepped up to yet. So what do? Because our soul knows how capable we are, but our ego's telling us, nope, let's play it safe. You don't want to feel rejected. You don't want to feel stupid. So then we're sitting there in that dichotomy of expecting the worst but hoping for the best. Again, that's still that's got your central nervous system not in alignment, because and we do have positive and negative in us, but we don't have to keep saying the old tapes. What do we want? What we want is just as important. Yes, an expectation is I had to learn for myself, Epic, that to have an expectation is having an appointment with disappointment. That's what I had to learn about expectations, is it's an appointment with disappointment, because I did not understand expectations. And the reality is, a lot of times, a lot of us in trying to do our safety, so this is why it's important to know our intentions and motivations and what do I want, because sometimes in our safety, we have a bar so high that we ourselves aren't even reaching that bar. So we aren't conscious. So that's what we're talking about today, is that consciousness. And that's why we feel like a failure, is because we aren't conscious yet of what it is that we want. So oftentimes we settle for less than, because, well, we're hoping for the best and expecting the worst. Sometimes we think balance is settling, or I did. So, some of the things that we sometimes think I'm intuitive, sometimes I've worked with people who were getting into healthy relationships. They were healing from anxious attachment and avoided attachment. And when they got in a healthy relationship and someone said to them, I'm not going anywhere, they could sense that they were a bit insecure. And when they told them, I'm not going anywhere, they thought that meant that they were going somewhere. So if we're hoping for the best and expecting the worst, then when somebody says to us, I'm not going anywhere, are we going to believe that they're not going anywhere? Because it's what our mental dialogue, our brain has told us about things, that not to trust ourselves, not to trust someone else. When we can't trust ourselves, we're not going to trust other people. And when we haven't trusted other people, we might not trust ourselves if we've given those people the power. I had to learn how to take my power back. I gave the people the power. So this is why I understand this. And my nervous system was running crazy, because I grew up with, uncertainty, a lot of uncertainty. And so this also creates our nervous system, and a lot of us aren't even aware of what our nervous system does. That sometimes when we're sick at our stomach, it doesn't mean that we need to put food on it. Sometimes it's distraction. Sometimes we're distracted from thinking these thoughts that randomly pop up in our mind, and they may not even be real from this time. We might have been bullied when we were younger, but sometimes we bully ourselves today. So it's about understanding what our thoughts are rather than trying to figure out what other people think and going down into this prison. Because sometimes, whether it's food, drugs, alcohol, shopping, we end up in a prison of feeling like we owe. And that's because the whole idea of obligation started that ball rolling, is that some of us learn transactional love, not unconditional love. And so that's what starts that ball rolling. Some of it, anyway, in my mind. Whew. So, back to our notes. Thank you all so much for your comments. So, it was constantly taking information about what felt safe. You know, we do the breathing at the end of this. So, just for a few moments, somebody can understand what feeling safe feels like. Because sometimes with our central nervous system, we don't know what safety feels like. I had to learn what safety felt like. So what we know what felt, you know, we don't know what felt safe. We know what felt uncertain, what created connection. This is it was constantly taking information about our body, our nervous system. It was constantly taking information in about what felt safe, what felt uncertain, what created connection, what created conflict. A lot of people I work with do not like conflict and confrontation, so they go to the extreme. They're either in fight mode, flight mode, or shut down, you know. So what did we need to do to navigate the environment we were in? That's definitely linked to your central nervous system, that flight, fight, and freeze. So this is one reason I think it's important to understand our nervous system without turning everything into a diagnosis or a problem that needs to be fixed. There are certainly chemical imbalances in people, and those need a diagnosis. But sometimes when we've suffered with trauma, we may mistake a chemical imbalance from not healing from trauma, like Dr. Bruce D. Perry and Oprah Winfrey wrote, "What happened to you?" Because if you grew up in a narcissistic environment, then you ended up fragmented. Your nervous system was fragmented because nothing you ever did was good enough. And so, all right, Jatsira, we're not talking about that on here. We don't talk about religion, politics, my age, or my dating status. So thank you. I hope you'll stay and listen to the topic, but that's not what we talk about here. Thanks, Epic. So it's important to understand our nervous system so we don't kill our nervous system. Try to shut down those feelings. Thank you. We won't try to shut down those feelings. We won't try to make sense, because kids, when we got those feelings as kids, we tried to make sense of it. And in this book, The Body Keeps the Score, it shows that our breathing stops and we can't think. Our creativity stops when we feel disappointed, let down, trauma, whatever. If you get told that what you draw, you get disappointed and let down, your breathing is going to stop. So this is one reason I think it's important to understand our nervous system without turning everything into a diagnosis or a problem that needs to be fixed. Dr. Gabor Mate says a lot of people diagnosed with ADD or ADHD, and I'm not saying that people who are diagnosed are not ADD or ADHD. I'm not denying your diagnosis. I'm not a doctor. So just hear me out. I'm saying what Dr. Gabor Mate says. Dr. Gabor Mate says a lot of people actually were this fragmented because when you don't know what to do, when it seems like nothing you do is right, and you're walking on eggshells and you're trying not to rock the boat, this affects your central nervous system. And so a lot of times we can't focus, we can't concentrate. When you grow up in uncertainty and you don't know what's going to happen when you go home, then you can't focus sometimes and you can't concentrate. And that's a sign of ADD or ADHD, but you may not have it chemically, or what have you. It may not be something that's really, you may be able to heal it. I'm not saying go off your meds, stay on your meds, but, just being able to do the healing work of your emotions. So it's mental, the mental and emotional work, building mental muscles and emotional stamina. Because a lot of us have this dialogue when we say, I'm trying, we're also saying, I can't, and you can. And you are trying, and you are succeeding. It's just we don't recognize the success. No one ever taught you maybe how to recognize success. So I hope that whatever I say today can help you to recognize yourself. I have Wednesdays on here, WINSDAY, because a lot of people weren't taught to recognize their wins. They weren't encouraged. They weren't supported. Mental diagnosis is guesswork. Best to define it and take the wheel, in my opinion. Yeah, because there's so many things it could be. Labels make us a slave to others' opinions. Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Sometimes it's good to get the clarity of what is wrong, but it's not just always a pill or something that's going to fix it, So it is constantly taking information and helping us respond to what is happening around us. And sometimes what it has learned, because it helped me to learn what codependency was, as far as the title was. Do I like to call myself codependent all the time? Not really. I am, but I don't practice codependency. I'm an addict, but I don't practice my addiction, at least not in a harmful way, unless coffee is harmful. I know, right, Grinch? I know, that's pretty. And sometimes what our body has learned in the past influences how we interpret the present. What our central nervous system has learned in the past, we think it's still going on in the present. That's why we're anticipating and strategizing and expecting the worst and hoping for the best. Thank you, mister. So that doesn't mean our experiences weren't real, because we had these experiences. Some people in here have had some horrible experiences. The experiences were real. But how we cope with those experiences and how we see life through our own eyes instead of these lies, because sometimes we told ourselves lies when we bullied ourselves. Because when people bully you, that's them not loving themselves. Hurt people hurt people. And it doesn't mean, I'm not one that says, oh, it's just a cry for love, that I'm supposed to love them more. I can pray for them, but I can move on because I'm not subjecting myself to somebody else's pain and letting their pain become my pain. So what do you want? It means experiences taught us something. My pain taught me something. My pain was a catalyst for my growth. It didn't make me a victim. So sometimes what we learned was useful but doesn't necessarily need to remain the rule today. So Friday, who has the pen? So are we going to give our power away? Are we going to hold our own pen? Are we going to hold the pen? This is what I want. We just had Lionsgate, and I am a little woo-woo. Don't hate. So what I did was I wrote down what my plan is, because Lionsgate's 2 days after my birthday, and I have a whole plan for this year. I don't just live life on default. What I want is important. And see, when I know what I want is important, I'm not worrying about if I'm compatible with somebody else, because I know that what is compatible for me is going to come along my path. I'm not trying to put myself in alignment with somebody else's path. I'm trying to stay my path. Okay, Mom. I don't know what that means, but good morning, Mama. I didn't see scam. Is there a scam there? I don't know. Epic, that was my mom, but I don't know. She's older. Sometimes she don't know. She might be saying that, stuff's going on my mom's phone all the time. She's got an Android, and she's probably getting some unsolicited stuff on her phone. Knowing my mama, stuff is popping up on her phone all the time. So she's probably trying to hit stop scam on her phone for whatever stuff's popping up. See, this is why I can't have an Android. It's okay. It's why I can't have an Android, because they'll be making updates and stuff. What if I'm on here and if I had an Android and I was on here and it started updating some stuff? That's what happens to her phone, and it's like, oh no. So I got an iPhone. Nathan, hiya. Hello, Nathan in England. Good morning, Jen. Good morning. Internet acting up here. So it's okay. You know how it is. We're getting to the story. We're not to the story yet. We're at Fridays. No worries, Epic. That's probably what she was trying to do, is tell whatever message was popping up on her phone scam. Bless her heart. So, and I'm not saying that in a bless her heart in the bad way, y'all. Because, from Texas, you don't know if it's bless their heart in a bad way or a good way. And again, that's something that I learned from the language there in Texas, I had a client yesterday, and I was like, I'd be like, darling, I call y'all darling. And I'm like, look, I'm not flirting. This is just how I talk. Okay. So Friday, who has the pen? Are we going to give our power, the pen, to somebody else to write our story? And wish, this is what most people, this is why I live the way I live my life, and that I have my pen and I write my story. And on Lionsgate, thank you. That was my bestie's book, Organizing. So on Lionsgate, I'm writing out, this is what I want to create this year. These are the elements that I'm using that I want to create. This is how we're going to do it. And I want to stay in the flow. I want to, I'm connecting with everything so that I can grow. So, thanks, Nathan. Hello, Marshall. So, who has the pen? This is where we brought our conversation into choice on Friday. And we're talking about unconscious being brought to consciousness, because a lot of the survival skills were unconscious survival skills. Conscious navigating is consciousness. Having our pen, saying, this is what I want to do within the next year. I often encourage people to write down a plan for the next 3 months, the next 6 to 9 months, to a year, so that when we look back, we feel more accomplished with what we've done rather than I just got through it. I used to just get through life, but life becomes an adventure and becomes exciting when I get to have the pen and I get to chart what it is I want to do, where I want to grow. So this is what brought our conversation into choice, was on Friday. If I didn't consciously create every belief on my map, did I create that belief, that hoping for the best and expecting the worst? Is that did I create that? No, that was something that was handed down from generation to generation. But it can stop here. This is how we break cycles and interrupt patterns. And those patterns being not just in our behavior, but that nervous system pattern. Your nervous system has a pattern. Sometimes when it's too peaceful, people who are addicted to chaos are going to be like, I know something bad's about to happen, right? That catastrophizing. I know, right, Marshall? I have to write down my stuff too, because once I write it down, it's happening. It's happening. But if I don't write it down, I might forget where I'm going. So it's about writing our map so I don't forget where I'm going and I get sidetracked. This is like when somebody wants to attract a partner. If you're not in a relationship, those who want to attract a partner, it's like, write down what you want, because if we don't write down what we want, we may settle for something else and try to fit them into a mold. And if we're honest with ourselves, we were always trying to fit them into a mold and then trying to measure up to their mold to fit them in our mold. And that doesn't make sense. But we didn't know it didn't make sense because we didn't question it. We didn't see what is my intention and my motivation. What do I want to create? So yeah, if some of those beliefs were formed while I was simply trying to understand and navigate the world, if I was just trying to get through it, get to it, to get through it, and you got to go through it to get to it. But a lot of people get halfway through it and they're like, I tried, it didn't work. We have to keep going. And then, another very important question, I've changed my destiny. I'm still going to move to Europe, but I've had to change my destiny because things have to line up. What I want is important. So I can't be giving up things. I don't give up things anymore that I want, that I love, that I need, because of one thing. Is if one thing's not going to work, I can do something else. And it might be better. And this way this is going to turn out, is this is going to be better than what I planned. And I'm not going to tell y'all yet until I get it all figured out. Because y'all know, watch, y'all see me next year. And I'm not going to be sitting here next year. I'll be sitting somewhere else. So, yeah. So I have an important question to ask. What do I want to do with the information that I have now? What do I want to do with the information that I have now? It isn't about blaming our parents. Our parents did the best they could with what they knew. And we as parents did the best we could with what we knew. We're not perfect. We aren't. And we have to look at our expectations, Epic. We do. Because a lot of us developed expectations from other people about what happened with our parents. And sometimes the expectations that we have with other people are those that our parents had. And sometimes they're the expectations that our parents had of us that we may be expecting someone else. I know that I have to deal with that with my own daughter because things evolve and change. So I was talking to my best friend about this morning, and part of this evolvement and changing is like when I was a kid and you were invited to a birthday party, right? Let me know if this resonates with y'all. When I was a kid, so this is my parents, when they went to birthday parties as kids, it was different. And, as teenagers, we say life was different when you were growing up, and it was. And our life is different, but it doesn't mean that we know more than our parents just because it doesn't take their wisdom away like when we're 14 we want to think, or I did anyway. So the thing is that sometimes my healing work that I have to do today is about the expectations that were placed on me as a young adult, as a kid, that I may think of my daughter. At first I may be hurt that my daughter doesn't do something that I did when I was a kid, but she grew up in a different time, so this is how this works, okay? So when my daughter was when I went to birthday parties as a kid, my mom would, some I got to go to, some I did not, because we felt like I had to take a present, right? Is that I had to take a present. This is our programming, is I have to take a present to this party. To these days, people take presents and they don't take presents. That's the thing. But in those days, you took a present to a party, right? So sometimes I got to go to the birthday party if we could get a present, and sometimes I didn't get to go to the birthday party. And it depended on how much, my parents knew and the other parents and da 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 da. So we do this, right? So then when my daughter went to birthday parties, guess what? I'd be like, don't we need to get a present? And she would be like, no, I don't need a present, Mom. And so today, kids don't take presents to birthday parties. So sometimes they may treat us according to how it was when they're a kid. Our kids may treat us about their generation. But if we're from another generation and we have an expectation that our kids in this generation are going to treat us from that generation, good luck. Some people get their kids to do that kind of thing. Maybe it's because, I was divorced. Those do that affects our children. I did the best I could with what I knew. And so that's what we do. That's what your parents did. So it's not about blaming our parents. It's not about blaming religion. I know I talked to, a few people, and the religious beliefs growing up were, taught them already that they were not worthy, that they weren't valuable, that they weren't divine. It negated what they come into this world to be, because you are all of that. So sometimes it's about what makes sense that we say to ourselves, what makes sense, and sometimes we just don't even question it. I know I questioned it, but I would get in trouble. They'd tell me, Stacy, you just have to have faith. So until I got grown, then could I start asking questions. And so it isn't about pretending that difficult things didn't happen, It's about becoming conscious and aware of what we're saying to ourselves, what we're saying to other people, because sometimes we think they don't like me, but we don't think about what we're saying. I work with people that have learned to question what they're saying, because sometimes people, have learned to be sarcastic or try to be funny because they felt like people wouldn't like them if they weren't, but sometimes they found out that being sarcastic and funny, that people they were afraid of then people rolling their eyes and all of this. So this is us trying, but not accepting ourselves to be accepted by somebody else, So it is about learning the why am I doing this? I hold your parents accountable for what they're guilty of. Nothing more, nothing less. Doesn't hinder my progress anymore. Well, that's good, Epic. It doesn't mean that we're going to like what our parents did to us or did because they didn't know any better. Because I don't really think they were intending to do it to us. But as kids, and our little souls knew that we come here worthy, valuable, and divine, and if we were treated any less because our own parents forgot how worthy, valuable, and divine that they were, and they were just trying to survive, then they may have given us pain they didn't intend to inflict on us. I'm a parent, so I know, I know that sometimes we're trying to protect our kids from our own pain. And that's just because we didn't get the consciousness, and we don't know until we know. And consciousness is once we know, So I don't have to guilt my daughter for things, I don't have to guilt my kids for things that maybe my parents were guilted for, because my parents might have been guilted for something. How does it serve us to even think if somebody is guilty or innocent unless we're in a court of law? It's not saying, again, that bad things didn't happen to us. It's not. But for me to keep carrying that in my psyche all the time and giving that the power to hold my pen, see, that's a lot of times people have some terrible things done to them as children by their parents. And I don't live in a Pollyanna world either. The thing is though the heroes that I have in this life, some of them had things happen to them as children, but they overcome it and become, somebody who's vocal, who's not afraid to be seen and heard, because a lot of that trauma makes people be afraid to be seen and heard. And they just act out with sarcasm or funniness or what have you to try to be accepted. But they're learning to accept themselves. They're learning, oh, I was trying to get accepted is why I was saying this, or I felt a tinge of rejection, so I decided to do this. But I don't know if that was rejection. I expected rejection. So when we start learning the difference between expectation and intuition, and we start learning about, what we want and feeling worthy enough to go after what we want, because why don't we go after what we want? Or why do we settle? When we start asking ourselves those questions, we can get the answers to those questions. But if we just decide, I'm not worthy is why they're treating me this way. No, we chose them, so we can call them a victim. Now, I'm not talking about your parents, y'all, Epic. I'm not talking about parents. But the other people after the parents, if we chose them, and maybe we chose our parents. I'm not even sure that we didn't. But that's, everybody has their own belief system. And that's okay. But, I didn't, did we consciously? I don't know. Or did we? We can't even remember the day we were born, y'all. So there's a lot of controversy. So what we can deal with is what's happening today. They had the tools for self-improvement. They lacked the inspiration and effort to do so. I don't know that they did, Epic. I mean, I'm going to disagree with Love there, because we are so fortunate today that there are these labels. So there's these labels, like I was codependent. Now, being codependent, it had me blaming a lot of people for things, because that was a learned behavior for me. And that was me not having my own power. Codependency caused me to see myself through other people's eyes rather than me seeing myself through my own eyes. And a lot of that had to do with my parents not being able to be seen through their own eyes. Because codependency is very well taught in religion and parenting and in even marketing. I had a whole hour conversation with one of my clients yesterday about how marketing even influences us and our belief systems. So, and that not good enough or good enough, So our parents didn't have the information highway. They didn't have YouTube nonstop. We didn't even have that when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I had to watch cartoons in the morning and then after I got home from school, but I only had an hour and a half to watch cartoons in the morning. So this is the evolving. That's what we do on those Thursday night groups every other Thursday in our Facebook subscription group on Zoom, is we talk about the evolving self, because our parents didn't have YouTube. They didn't have Google. So they would have to know, my mom would have had to know what codependency was, which she did not know what codependency was. I had to learn what codependency was when I was a mom. So I didn't, thankfully, that's why my daughter and I have a different relationship than I had with my mom, but it doesn't mean, and of course my daughter is probably mad at me for the way that I was sometimes. I know that she is, and it's okay, because she's still an amazing girl. She's an amazing woman, and it doesn't take away my being amazing because she gets mad at me for being mom. So it is. It just is what it is, Mr. Yates, let's see what you said. Hold on. Let me catch up. Marshall, my mom cussed me and my siblings with the worst words imaginable until I was 18 years old. All parents aren't the same. I hope I will be kind to my future kids. I hear you. I know what you mean, Marshall. And some of the things my parents said to me were some throwed off things that I would not repeat to my kids. There was some things, but they heard it from somewhere, apparently, because why they would say that, I don't know, But the thing is that healing requires us not to give them the power. That's the thing, is that we can't control how we had to adapt growing up. But when we can acknowledge that I adapted to this growing up, but I don't have to live by this rule now. you know, is I get to take my power back. I get to interrupt that internal pattern, because when your mom cussed you out, that didn't feel good. And you probably went, because that wasn't who you are. You didn't deserve that. You didn't deserve that. That doesn't mean you deserve that. But what happens is our bodies react to this because we can't make sense out of that. And so sometimes our neural pathways develop ways where we don't get seen when we're afraid we're going to get cussed out. So we play small. That is what causes us oftentimes to play small, is someone saying something to us that would, people may say, make me feel small. And so then we may play small. And that's a result of that, but we may not recognize it as an adult. We just feel the pain of no one ever seeing us, but we don't realize the origin. And while we even know the origin, sometimes we don't do anything about it. Well, like what was said earlier, our parents have the tools, but they don't know, because we don't know. My mom would have had to walk into the library, and I don't even know if they had books on that, because codependency, it is good to know what codependency is, because expectations deal a lot with codependency. That's how I learned about expectations, was codependency. Because a lot of people think they know what codependency is, but they don't know. Because it's hammered at you from all these directions, but until you know what it is, we don't know. And my mom didn't know what codependency was. She just knew that she didn't want what happened with her mom to happen to me. And that was how she navigated. And there's nothing wrong with that. It wasn't her intention that, it would create an internal pattern that caused me to settle growing up and to make excuses for people. Because a lot of kids make excuses for their parents, or not. They're mad at their parents. But either way, if they make excuses for their parents they love, or they're mad at their parents they love, they're still navigating today, unless they take their pen back and realize that forgiveness of themselves for the power they have given that. Like, I had to forgive myself. It wasn't so much that my mom or dad or anybody needed that forgiveness. Of course I did, for whatever I perceived the pain was. But I don't let that pain run me today. I get to process it when I see it come up, because it isn't just a one and done. We can't just intellectualize and say, oh, this stuff doesn't hurt me anymore. We can't just magically say 3 times, this don't hurt me, this don't hurt me, this don't hurt me, because until we heal the neural pathway, that survival skill, that unconscious map that we've been on, that we didn't even know, when we give our power away to somebody else to make us feel better, to not cuss us out, to not do this, and then they do it, right? Has that happen to you? Marshall, have you not had anybody else cuss you out but your mom? Because sometimes we develop an expectation that somebody's going to cuss us out because of that. Mr. Yates, interesting to think about choosing parents and being adopted. It is interesting. That is very interesting, Mr. Yates. I feel like with adoption that some parents weren't ready to be parents yet. And they did the best thing, but I know that even that feels abandoned. It could feel abandoned. So we have choices. This is what we're talking about for Fridays. We talked about choices of how we choose to perceive that, right? They might not have had TV, depending on your age, right? I know that for my mom, she didn't know what codependency was. She didn't know how to heal from her wounds as a child. She would have had to walk in a library. Epic, and be like, yes, can you tell me how to navigate? And they only had Dr. Spock back then. They did. They only had Dr. Spock. So I'm not making excuses. I just think that she did the best she could with what she knew, and I think most of our parents did. Some people are sorry excuses. I'm not saying that there's not sorry excuses, because I have heard of some parents doing some horrible things, calling their kids horrible names, Marshall. But what I'm saying is do we still call ourselves horrible names? Do we still do this? Are we still living from this not wanting to be seen or heard so we don't get called horrible names? Because a lot of people, that's where they give that power away. Or they think that power is calling somebody horrible names. Epic. There were wise men thousands of years ago. No excuses. All right, Epic. All right. Those are belief systems, and there were wise men. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying that, that as things evolve, things change. And there were also the same things happening today with people that happened back then that, a lot of people say, oh, the world's going to hell in a handbasket. It's always stuff being revealed to us. Always. Nathan, you can also love your parents from a distance. Absolutely, Nathan. We can absolutely love our parents from a distance. I work with people, sometimes they have to go no contact with their parents, because when you got a verbally abusive parents, Marshall, you go no contact with them. I have a client that, her mom tells her, you're going to rot in hell, da-da-da-da-da, all this kind of crazy stuff. She tries to unblock her mom sometimes because she longs to have a relationship with her mom. But her mom is verbally abusive, like Marshall's mom was. And even still, this girl's grown now, and her mom is still verbally abusive. And so you do. Sometimes you got to block them. I don't have to block my mom, but some people do have to block their moms and dads. Sometimes you just got to love from a distance, just like Nathan said, yeah. Marshall, my mom's cussing almost every day really messed up my childhood. Yes, it did. I don't care about my dad's physical abuse to me, but somehow I can't deal with the emotional abuse from my mother. Yeah. Because in our belief system, moms are supposed to nurture us, right? And so when they don't nurture us, that's not congruent with what things are, our expectations, and it shouldn't be. You didn't deserve physical abuse from your dad, and you didn't deserve emotional abuse from your mom. You didn't deserve that, and mental abuse. And so I hope that you get the healing from that, because you were born worthy, valuable, and divine. And just because they forgot they were, sometimes that inflicts onto you. They impose their belief system onto you. And just like was said earlier, like from Nathan, is that, our belief systems, this is why we don't talk about religion and politics on here, because so many of us are here and we have different belief systems, but we want unconditional love, but we've been judged, and our biggest fear may be judgment, and that may be why we settle for things, or why we don't, stand up for who we are. And it doesn't mean standing up like meaning to fight. Standing up for who we are just means saying, you know what, I don't necessarily agree with that. I had somebody, one of my clients yesterday, she's learning to stand up for herself, and her birthday was too, the other day, and she said, I don't feel like we celebrated it like I wanted to celebrate it. And I said, well, you can ask for a redo, because I had to learn to ask for a redo when my birthday didn't get celebrated the way that I want, or, something didn't get celebrated the way that I wanted. It's learning how to stand up for herself and use our words, and not just say, okay, well, because my birthday didn't go how I wanted, that means that nobody cares about me and that nobody loves me, because that's BS. But that's our verbal abuse that we may impose on ourselves, gathered from these belief systems. And that's not true, because somebody does care about you. Why do we give those that may be negative more power than all the positive ones, right? So it's not about blaming our childhood. That's where we get empowerment, is a lot of people on here had some messed up childhoods, but we don't blame our childhood for how we behave today. There you go. There you go, Epic. Yeah, you don't have to have a relationship. I do not encourage people to have a relationship with physically, emotionally, and mentally abusive people, parents, or anything. Because you were born worthy, valuable, and divine, and your soul knows that you deserve to be treated that way. And so sometimes we should on ourselves, and that's part of that understanding that we're living in survival mode, because, I should have done this, or I should have done that. That's that strategizing. We quit strategizing, and we get into ownership. Sometimes we're going to do stuff wrong. We're going to misunderstand something. It doesn't mean that we're stupid because we misunderstand something. It means that we had a thought, and maybe the thought didn't catch up with the other, but that's the way life is. That's why we have to learn. We don't get to some place where we're not learning in this life. So this is reasonable expectations, when we get into reasonable expectations and unreasonable expectations. So because when we understand where something came from, so when we understand why we are having the problems that we have, or why we're doing what we're doing, why am I doing this if it's not working? If I'm doing the same thing expecting different results, And we realize, okay, well, I created this isn't me that's bad, because we want to title things good and bad and extremes of things. But there's harmony in between when I can own my goodness and own my badness. Because I'm not perfect, I'm perfectly imperfect. We're all perfectly imperfect. So when we can quit defending what we perceive as bad and heal that we perceive as bad, and understand, where did it come from? Why do I think this way if it's not working for me? Especially if I'm doing the same thing that I'm upset with other people for doing to me. If I'm doing the same thing, and a lot of us don't realize, we think that that's our reality when we're verbally abusing ourselves. But that's not even our reality. That's not our reality now. We might have been verbal abused before, but we are the ones, if we're still carrying that and haven't forgiven ourselves for the power we gave that over us, then we're going to keep carrying that reality, and that's not happening today. That's why the breathing helps, because we can't take yesterday's breath today. We can't take tomorrow's breath today. We can only breathe today. What can I do today that puts me where I want to be? And it's not getting high and using things outside of yourself, okay? Lovely to have found your channel today. Thank you so much, Nathan. I'm so glad that you did find the channel today, and I'm glad that you're here. I appreciate that, and I appreciate your input. So thank you so much. We'll get to story time here in a minute. So that information, when we can process the information, because as a child and we had to adapt, we didn't have the capacity to process this information and to realize our worth and our value. And it certainly did make you feel unworthy and unvaluable, probably. But how is it serving us today? So we can have our own choices. So maybe I learned to make myself smaller, considering this. Maybe I learned that I needed to be needed. A lot of people learn they needed to be needed. That's part of codependency too, to be seen and heard and to feel loved. Maybe I learned that money wasn't safe. Maybe I learned that success came with a cost. A lot of people are afraid of success because they think, if I have success, then I can't have love. If I have love, I can't have success. So it's what they tell themselves, right? That belief system. So maybe I learned that being accepted, hey Grinchy, maybe I learned that being accepted meant becoming what other people wanted me to be. That unconditional love, trying to get it from somebody else rather than learning to have it for myself. Maybe I learned to protect myself by never needing anyone. Those beliefs may have developed, us to strategize through life at some point. And even in my life, it did. But do you still want to use that map if that's you? Do I still want to use that map? No, I create my map. Like I said, I wrote down everything I want to manifest in the next year, that I want to do in the next year. And I know that if it can happen for other people, it can happen for me too. So that's why I get on here to tell you that also. So that's a very different question than with what's wrong with me. Because how many of us, when we get appointment with disappointment epic, we say, what's wrong with me? Now, I know you're not doing that now. But a lot of us, I used to think that, what's wrong with me? Why do I never get chosen? Why is this? And it started way back in 5th grade for me. It's like, I worked my butt off on this project, and somebody else did too, but I wanted to get picked and I didn't get picked. So it processes my work in 5th grade was not good enough. So I kept that imprint of I'm not good enough. So many of us do that. That's why I get to do what I get to do, because I know that feeling, and I know that thought, and I know how to rewire that feeling and that thought. Epic. You should make a t-shirt with Grinch wearing a Santa hat. I know, right? Maybe I will. I could. Oh, I'm not mad anymore. I just objective accountability. I took my piece and they have theirs. Yes. We have to have our peace. What's peaceful? And choosing that, So there may not be anything wrong with you, is what I'm trying to say, is that may have been something that just doesn't serve us for us to even think today. And so it's about acknowledging all the things that I have done. Having support even. Support is people encouraging you, not saying you should do this, you should do that. That might be what we thought support was, because maybe people that we thought should support us or people that we thought would support us did not support us. They might not have known how, and then again, they might have and just chose not to. But are we going to give them our power today? So the part we don't always talk about is there's another piece to this, is when we begin becoming conscious, we don't suddenly know exactly what we're doing. We don't. It's just a process, little things, and that can feel uncomfortable that we just don't know at first. I have a lot of uncertainty, but I've learned to have an adventure with uncertainty. And a lot of people come from fear, so we have to heal what gives us that fear. And there are healthy fears and unhealthy fears. We live in an electromagnetic universe with positives and negatives. So there's always healthy and unhealthy. There's always good and there's bad. And then there's always, the light aspects and the dark aspects. And then there's always the cold and the hot, and these are part of life. We need that in part of life. Where we have harmony is when we can embrace both. Because we like the warm water. So we like excitement, but we also like stillness. So embracing it all. So because we're usually accustomed to maps, is that a part of your central nervous system is if you can't get comfortable with the chaos and you can't get comfortable with the silence, well then that lets us know that our internal map, that central nervous system I keep talking about, is dysregulated, and that's all that it is. It doesn't mean that you're bad or you're unworthy or that all of this that our mind may make up. It just means we're not regulated. We're about to do the story and breathe after I go through this part. So when we begin becoming conscious, we may not suddenly know. It's not like you can't intellectualize this stuff. It's not just we're going to wake up one day and it's those pains and those old things aren't going to be there. We're going to know how to heal through them once we start taking our pen and start being like, okay, this is what happened. This is where I'm at today. And this is where I want to go, So we become accustomed to maps, what other people tell us, whether it's marketing, whether it's religion, whether it's parents, whether it's partners, whether it's our kids. We have got people who have expectations of us, right? And are we holding the pen? Are we allowing those expectations to make us unhappy and then blaming somebody else or blaming ourselves? So when we become accustomed to maps, we like to know the destination. So we start having expectations, expecting the worst, and trying to survive. So we like to know the destination. We like to know the route. We like to know certainty, right? We like to know what's going to happen next. Maybe we don't talk about my dating status, my age, religion, and politics on here, but you're welcome to stay, and I hope you'll enjoy what we're talking about. So we like to know what's going to happen next, but life doesn't work that way. Even the best map cannot tell us everything we will encounter. We just won't know. It's not going to be perfect. Everything's perfectly imperfect, and it's building character. They used to talk about building character in the old days. We are still building character. So there will always be something that we haven't seen before. We can get excited about it or be fearful. So it's about healing. Sometimes we got to cry. One of the people that I worked with yesterday, is I get to work with some men. And, it's like, it's okay to cry, because crying is the healthy release of frustration, of being overwhelmed, of these emotions. If we don't cry, sometimes it comes out violently or passively inside our body or outside of our body. So there will always be something that we haven't seen before. Getting excited about these things, a change, a relationship, an opportunity, a loss, a decision, a new direction, a road that wasn't on the original map. And that is where I want to take us for story time today, because you cry every day, Stelio. Are you depressed though? Because there is clinical depression. So we're all going to cry when you run out of weed. Okay, well then you're self-medicating, right? I used to love weed too, and I had to learn that the weed just covered up the feelings, and I cried when I smoked weed, and then I cried when I didn't smoke weed. So it was just about learning to recognize my feelings, and the weed helped me to be not living in reality. And I don't mean that I went tripping into I didn't go tripping into, other things, but I would sit on my couch and wish that I did things that I didn't have the energy to get up and do. I wasn't motivated to do it when I smoked weed. I had a lot of dreams, but I didn't get off the couch and go do them. I didn't have the confidence. The weed didn't give me confidence. It gave me a false confidence, but it didn't give me a real confidence to make things happen. So, uncharted territory. This is our story today. So let's take a deep breath before we do the story, okay? So I want you to get focused and centered, because a lot of times our ego, from what I've said today, our ego will be like, yeah, I kind of relate. No, that's not me. That's the way I was when I first read that book, Codependent No More, was I was like, oh, no, no, no. But really, 7 years later or so, I realized that, yeah, I was codependent. That was me in that book. So this is why I like to tell the stories, because sometimes we relate more with the story. So I look forward to seeing your comments and if you relate to this story. So let's take a deep breath in and release. I just want you to be here and now. This puts you in the present moment. Now we will do a breathing exercise at the end of this. We'll do 5 breaths, but right now we're just going to take one more and then I'm going to start reading, okay? All right, so take a deep breath in and release. All right, here we go. Uncharted territory. Perhaps the adventure isn't about finally having a map that tells us exactly what's going to happen. Perhaps the adventure is learning how to navigate when we don't know, not being in fear, right? Not having fear as the X on our map. Our nervous system is doing its job trying to gather information about what is happening now, right now. And it's good if you're going to get hit by a car, you know to be in panic mode and survival mode, but sometimes we're stuck in survival mode. Our minds are always making meaning of the information, and until we heal the information that wasn't pleasing to us, we might continue to see unpleasing things and not see the world as we want it to be. We may claim that it is as it is, and it is as it is, but is it holding us back and keeping us in lag? So if our breaths aren't as deep, if we don't understand or have a relationship with our digestive system, and if we don't feel our heart beat with the passion and love, so our minds are making meaning of the information that we see, hear, touch, taste, and feel, and even say and hear, So our beliefs are influencing how we interpret the terrain of our travels in this life. But conscious gives us another role. We get to become the navigator in these stories. We can pause, we can observe, we can ask better questions. Because sometimes we shoulda, woulda, coulda on ourselves after we walk away. We're like, I should have asked, rather than being present, and then the recall just naturally comes. And we want that naturality, but we don't see it because we don't feel it. We can notice what our body is communicating without allowing every sensation to make the decision for us. That when we get sick at our stomach, that we think that we have to eat. That when our heart is racing, we think it must be love when it's just a familiar experience, or that it must be hate when it's just a familiar experience. That we don't have to make a story up about it. We can recognize an old belief without automatically obeying it, going into that flight, fight, and freeze. We can acknowledge fear without handing the fear the steering wheel. And we can move forward without having every mile of the road figured out. And that, to me, is what conscious growth looks like. Not certainty, but navigation. So think about traveling somewhere that you've never been. I'm going to different places in Europe next year. And I'm not afraid at all. I'm not afraid. I've got a lot of things to do to prepare for that trip, but I'm not afraid of anything not happening that I want to happen to make it happen. So I want you to think about a trip you want to go to, and shut up the talk that says that is able to find the problems and not the solutions, because there's a solution for every problem. So you may have a map and you may have a destination. You may even have a general idea of the route, but you don't know every road you'll encounter. You don't know every person you'll meet. When we're not afraid, we get to meet amazing people. When we go somewhere, we can be like, who am I going to get to meet today? Not, oh, I'm afraid to go because what if they make up a story before we even get out the door? You don't know every person you'll meet. You don't know where you'll stop on your road map, your navigation. You don't know what might change along the way. If you're going to have a flat or not, because we have the ups and the downs, air in and air out. And yet you go, and that's life. That's life. We are constantly moving through territory that we've never experienced before. Sometimes our old map is helpful, and sometimes it needs updating. Sometimes we discovered we've been traveling toward a destination that wasn't even ours. It was other people's expectations. That's where the road sign led to, is expectations. And sometimes we didn't even have to stop and ask, is this still where I want to go? We didn't even ask. That may be one of the most important questions we can ask ourselves. Not what should I do? What will make everyone else happy? Not what would I prove was right? We don't have to go down those avenues. We don't. But where do I want to go from here? Because conscious living isn't about controlling the entire adventure. It's about becoming conscious of the direction that you're choosing. It's learning to work with your mind, your body, and your nervous system. Your experiences, your gifts, and your beliefs, rather than allowing any one of them, to completely determine your destination. And maybe that's why uncertainty is such an important part of life. If we already knew exactly what was going to happen, there wouldn't be much adventure in it. Uncharted territory asks us something different. It asks us to pay attention, to stay curious. How many of y'all have driven somewhere and you don't even remember the drive there because you've got all these thoughts that I'm talking about? Your brain has all these thoughts and you don't even remember. You know someplace that you're going and you don't even think about how you're getting there. I'm glad you'll show me parts of England because, yes, I'm going to be close. I'm going up there. I'm going to Europe. So if you ever decided to travel here, I have to go now. But thank you so much. I'm so glad that you were here, Nathan, and that you subscribed, and I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. I will be back on here tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. So that's going to be really late for you. But I know I do have another person that's on here quite often that's from England also. So I love the connections we get to make here. All right. Have a great day. Thanks, Nathan. It was good to meet you. The Dope Man Travels. Hello. So stay curious, to use what we've learned, to trust ourselves enough to make the next decision. And then the next one. We don't need to know the entire route to make the next right turn. So bringing it all together, this week wasn't really about deciding which beliefs are good and which beliefs are bad. It wasn't about becoming aware of the map, but understanding where some of the information from our past map came from. Fatherless absence or limited presence of a father in a child's life has immensely, it has. Jen, never thought that there was where life was going to lead me, but at least I'm here. Yes, you are, Jen, and I'm so glad you are here. Thank you. I'm glad that you're here. And now you get to think, because we're never too old and it's never too late. Dominic, hello. How are you today? I'm good. So this story, yeah, here we go. We're almost done, y'all. Okay? So it's not like the stories I usually write, okay? When we get to recognize how our experiences, our beliefs, and our nervous system can influence the way we navigate, half hawk, half man, we are all spiritual beings, temporarily trapped in a body of flesh and bones. Our cognition is limited because we reason with physical confinement. Absolutely, but we're part spirit, like you said, we're part spirit connected with our soul, and we're human. And so we're human beings, we're spiritual beings having a human experience, right? Half hawk man, half hawk, half man. The topic for today is our map. How do we let others, we talked about on Monday, what is your internal map? Because a lot of people don't even know that we've been on this internal map. And it's certainly how our neural pathways affect that, and the things that we've seen and heard and experienced in the past, how it's influenced who we believe that we are, who our self-image is today. Geez, jaded, wasted. We spend so much time of our lives identifying with the body, the mind, our circumstances, and the material world, yet there may be a deeper aspect of ourselves that exists beyond all of these. Absolutely. And it's about finding that harmony in between being human and spirit, between our ego and our soul, because that's where our central nervous system is, pretty much located, is around your, what would be called your ego chakra, which I know that there's no ego exactly in the body. There's no body part identifying as the ego. Half hawk, half man. Will you please rewatch this? I hope that you'll subscribe and rewatch this, because I've been on here now an hour and 40 minutes. So I'm not going to go over this whole thing, but the internal map it's about understanding that our bodies are connected to our mind, that there's these neural pathways in our mind that are communicating all the time with our body. But sometimes we're so stuck in our mind, and like was said, with G's Jaded Wasted, our self-image, even though we think about all the time in our mind our self-image, oftentimes we are sabotaging our self-image while we're trying not to have certain experiences, right? Because a lot of people, based on this experiences and this is internal map, that blueprint that we feel like we were given at birth, because the parents influenced our internal map, the way that our belief system is. Our belief systems are part of that internal map. So our parents influenced that, because they were our gods when we were born, because we had no concept of God or spirit or none of that when we were born. We just knew that we were holy, healthy, happy, and divine. That's where our soul knew. When we were born, our soul knows that we are worthy and valuable. But then we have humans that come in, our parents, who are considered our gods, because while consciously some may believe, and we may have come from God, but we don't remember God consciously as babies, or if we do, we don't have the vocabulary to state that. I do believe we're more connected, if you believe in God, to God when we're born. But we don't have the consciousness to state that then. But as we start learning words, these words become our belief system. We talked about earlier about how the belief that hoping for the best and expecting the worst, that's not really in alignment with things. That gives mixed messages. So many of us, our parents gave us mixed messages, who were our gods, and that's how we learned to talk. That's how we learned the words that we did get to learn from the spirit from when we were born. And we learned these words from our parents, and most of them didn't have bad intentions. There are some that did. We've had people who've been cussed at by their parents on here, and sometimes parents do say some throwed off things because they're saying what their parents said. And so then you get into religion too. Add some religion when people really get to start learning about God. And then sometimes religion tells people that they're less than holy. And when I say holy, I'm talking about WHOLLY, because we were born whole. We didn't think there was anything wrong with us when we were born. And it's when we get into church, sometimes they tell us how wrong we are. And I'm not against religion. I'm just saying that sometimes certain religions can cause people to not feel good enough, and so they may take it that way, because everybody's perceptions are different. So people may think already that, and so they're being driven trying to prove then that they are good enough. They're trying to prove that this and that, and then they go to school. And then they're around other kids, and the kids have their beliefs from their parents and their beliefs from their religions, and then they start imposing their beliefs from their religions and their parents onto these other kids, and so people try to just fit in. And sometimes that internal map causes people bending themselves into a pretzel just to try to fit in, and they may feel like they're spending their whole life just trying, and thinking, I can't, because they're looking for evidence. They're looking for evidence that tells them they can't, instead of evidence that tells them they can. Because a lot of people didn't grow up knowing what support was, other than what people do. I go to work for you to make a living so that you can have clothes and shoes on your feet. I go to do this. So what we learned instead of unconditional love was expectations and obligations. And today people are saying no to expectations and obligations. And they are learning that when we are authentic and genuine to ourselves, as we are as spirits and spiritual beings and born, accepting the good and the bad together in harmony, but not having those expectations. Because expectations are an appointment with disappointment. So this is their review of what we talked about. So I hope that was helpful. Half hawk, half hawk, half man. Is your mental framework and beliefs, experiences, assumptions, expectations. Exactly. Thank you. Exactly. And what this does is all of that's in our head first, right? It's our perceptions. But it relieves what it does is it releases chemicals that release down in our body. So that goes down our ganglia chains, or not. Because sometimes these chemicals, when we go and we constrict, the good chemicals aren't allowed to go because we're not releasing good chemicals, right? And so when if we know how intrinsic our body is, then we'll know that what we think and how we feel does affect our body. And most of us don't think about how is it affecting my body. As some people may say in some faiths, our temple, or our vessel, or what have you, whatever people, but some people don't realize how, when we're always being a bully to ourselves, if we grew up being bullied as a result of all these different belief systems, then we may be in turn bullying ourselves. I know people who are bullying themselves on into the 70s and 80s because of these belief systems. But you're never too old and it's never too late, because I believe that's what we were put here to do on this earth, is to remember who we are in spiritual. Omnipresence, hello. Thank you very much for all those hearts and the roses. Good day, Dushman. Oh, Dushman. We're talking about consciousness, unconscious maps and conscious maps. A lot of times we don't realize the unconscious map that we're on in our life. We're not writing our own map. We're not drawing our own map. When we become conscious, we feel worthy, we feel whole, and we draw our own map and know that the people who's supposed to get in the car with us to go on this trip are going to go, and not be trying to get in the car with people holding our safety belt and scared. Because a lot of times we don't trust ourselves or other people based on the internal maps growing up. Were you saying our parents were our gods? No, miss, they were our guides. Well, when you were a 2-year-old, did you know your parent was your guide? I didn't know my parent was my guide, and I really didn't know that much about God when I was 2 years old in those terrible twos. So our relationship with him is like a God at first. We learn about God. As in our human bodies, we know God in our spirituality. When we connect our consciousness with God, we know God. But a lot of times we can have known of God, been taught of God, or that, but a lot of us don't really have that relationship with God, our bodies, our minds, and our souls. We go with what we're taught, that belief system. That's what I'm saying. My parents never claimed to be divine either, so I wish you were here the whole time, because you're not getting the whole gist of this. My parents never claimed that, although I thought that they were perfect. A lot of us think our parents are perfect and are sadly disappointed when we find out they are not perfect. Then I became a parent and I found out I wasn't perfect either. So I don't know about you, but I thought my parents were perfect for a long time. Self-help epic. How our beliefs and words influence our perception and our life path. Absolutely. Thank you, Epic. Meeting adversity head on lets you reap the benefits of your efforts for a much larger slice of the future. All right, half hawk, half man. Do you have a channel? Because this sounds like, that. But yes, that's intellectualizing, though, if we just say it like that. Now, there's a process to that, and that's what I try to share here on this channel, is meeting adversity. We're all going to have adversity, But a lot of people define themselves, this is more about self-esteem. A lot of people learn to define themselves by that adversity. I know I used to. So that's really where what we're talking about here is how to let go of that and create our own map. Because yes, it happens, but sometimes we develop an expectation that that's always going to happen. But that is right. And sacrifice is like, I don't like to use the word sacrifice because life is a journey and there is going to be sacrifice, but there's also going to be victories. So I don't like to focus too much. And a lot of times people hear the word sacrifice and we think that we're supposed to compromise ourselves because of sacrifice. So, it's about giving meaning to things. So I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Mental and physical health are interconnected. Thoughts and emotions affect the body while physical health, exactly, half hawk, half man. They do. It all works together. It does. But usually when people, experience some, when we have addiction, I'm a mindset coach, half hawk, half man. And as a mindset coach or life coach, my specialty is addiction, recovery, codependency, and grief. And a lot of us have made up stories about how these are supposed to look. A lot of people are unaware of what codependency behaviors look like and what that is. A lot of people, in addiction, it's the coping, but it beats people down. But it's really a learned behavior, some of it, and some of it is genetic. And so it's just about how do we change that? Because a lot of people, don't realize their bodies. And the bodies is the first thing to go when people have experienced trauma or experienced things. And they're just all in their head and they don't realize the effect of the body. So that's true what you're saying, is getting to know our body. I'm from Fort Worth, Texas, half hawk, half man, so it is a southern accent. Jen, my internal map has been a labyrinth beyond lost. I hear you, girl. I hear you, Jen, that mine has too. Mine has been, it's like, I didn't wake up like this. This is all I'm saying. I didn't wake up. I was, had trauma and I was always anticipating and strategizing life. But now I get to navigate the map because I went through the healing process and I learned to question my thoughts and to question my feelings. And that's not to blame myself or to shame myself. It's to question it and be like, oh, this is why this happened, and connecting dots. Because as a coach, that's what I do, is I help people connect those dots. And I've been lost too on that map. So half hawk, I think we both believe that with the right mindset and assistance, most defeats are merely a temporary detour on the path to victory. Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. Yes, yes, indeed. We can have victory. We do have challenges in life. Challenges are a part, but they don't define us. And we get to have victories, but sometimes when we have victories, we can't acknowledge them if our central nervous system is preparing for the worst, and we talked about some of those belief systems being like hoping for the best, but expecting the worst. And it's like, I had to learn to believe this or something better when I'm hoping on something, this or something better. Failure is also not only okay, but important. It is. That's what I was saying earlier, is failure is important. All the great inventors have failed first, and all the great sports people failed first. So it is part, but sometimes people grew up with parents who had a judgment about failing, and some kids suffered a lot because of the parents' judgment and fear of failing themselves. So they inflicted that onto the kids. So a lot of stuff, like that. Only those who are asleep make no mistakes. If you never fail, then you've made the mistake of setting goals that were too easily attained. Yeah. Goal setting is very important, and it's very important to carry through, but a lot of times the fears keep people from carrying through. So, in bringing the talk all together today, this week wasn't really about deciding which beliefs are good and which beliefs are bad, because we have them both. We do. And there's harmony in between. We've all overcome things. And see, some of us don't even recognize all that we've overcome. Epic. It's not about setting lofty goals. It's about being happy with where you are. Yes. That's why we do the breathing at the end of these, is so we can be in the present moment instead of trying to anticipate and strategize and regulate in our central nervous system and regenerate in our cells. Thank you, half hawk, half man. Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. Family is meant to be a shelter from the storm, but sometimes it can be the storm itself. That's so true. So this week wasn't exactly, we weren't deciding which beliefs are good and bad. We're just talking about navigating, learning to navigate instead of strategize. It was about becoming aware of the map, understanding where some of the information came from, and recognizing how our experiences, beliefs, and nervous system can influence the way we navigate. And remembering something incredibly important, that the map is information. Where you've been on your map and where you're at now and where you're going or growing is important. So it's not a command. You can look at your map, you can question your map, you can update your map, you can draw something new, and sometimes you can put the pen down altogether and simply just look at where you are. We're about to do that with the breathing, because you're not a finished destination. Where we are today, we might have thought about where we would be. I know 10 years ago, I thought about where I am today, and y'all heard me say that I'm not going to be in a year where I am right now, because I write my goals down. My goals are my map. I figure out how am I going to get there, and I take small incremental steps to get there. Because even though I want to be where I am next year, I'm not trying to rush my experiences in my life and my love for today. It doesn't mean where I'm at today that there's anything wrong with it, because I have plans on my map. A lot of us learned growing up, like half hawk, half man said, in the storm, we didn't learn how maybe to create our map. I forgot where I was going to go with that, but I had a thought and I lost it. So this is why I have notes, y'all. So we're still exploring, still learning, still developing our gifts, and we're still discovering what we're capable of. You're capable of a lot more than you probably give yourself credit for. So you're still traveling through territory you've never experienced before. So perhaps the goal isn't to create a perfect map. Perhaps the goal is to become a conscious navigator, to know yourself well enough to recognize when you're traveling from fear and when you're traveling from an old belief. Exactly. Happiness is the key to success. Yes, epic and hawk man. Yes. That's why I'm successful. I do love what I'm doing right now, but we're about to be breathing. So I'm going to finish up here. I thank you all who have been here all this time. And if you've subscribed to this channel, I'm reading your comment, half hawk, half man. Yes, because it's all aligned. It's all together. I always tell people when we acknowledge ourselves, and our soul, because acknowledging ourselves is when we understand that we're releasing these chemicals in our body by how we think and how we feel. And when we say, I don't feel like it, that's when we can question our motivations. Well, thank you. So, when you're traveling from, is to know when we're traveling from someone else's expectations. This is where a lot of the I can'ts come from, because you can't be in another person's mind. That's why the breathing is so good for our own divine mind. When you're traveling from your own values, gifts, and intuition and intention, that's how you is getting in your own mind, your own values, gifts, and intuition, because you have them. No one else needs to tell you you have them. It's nice when we hear it, but until you believe it, you won't receive it from somebody else. So when you can recognize the difference, you have something powerful. So let's talk about choice. The freedom to decide what comes next. Your belief system may be your internal map, your belief system, where you're going to go, what you're going to do. Are you giving somebody else the pen to tell you where to go and what to do? Or are you doing what you want to do? I've encouraged y'all to find out, what do you want to do? Sometimes we may be saying in our belief system, nobody wants to do what I want to do. But then when we're asked, what do I want to do? We're like, I don't know. See, so you got to know. And that's where we can grow. Thank you very much. I'm not a clinical psychologist. I have a background in going to a clinical psychologist. I sure do, but I'm not. I'm a mindset coach, a life coach. I specialize in addiction recovery, codependency and grief, and I've had over 2 decades of all of that and almost 3 in addiction recovery. So I know a lot from the School of Hard Knocks. The kind of experience I have, you could not get a degree for some of this. Your experiences may have drawn some of the original lines, but your life is still an adventure. There is uncharted territory ahead. We don't need to be afraid. We can be, but we don't have to be, because you have the pen. And the question isn't what happened to me. The question, after we figure out what happened to us, then we get to say, what am I going to create with what I know now? You know, so where are you going? What do you want to explore? I want you, when we do the breathing, to take this in. What do I want to do? You just have to do one thing to get you to where you want to be next year, today. But there's a series of things. Like I've got a 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and 9 to 12 months map, so that I can create what I want. So where are you going? What are you going to explore? What gifts do you want to develop? I'm learning, and I'm at an age where it's not easy to learn other languages, but I am learning other language besides Texas. This Texas accent, though, is hard for people to understand me speaking these other languages. I'm learning I know one other language right now, or I'm working on this one other language, and I'm about to pick up learning another language. So it's just like we are never too old to learn new things. So where do you look at the big X on your map? I want you to think about that. And it may not be that you're going to go anywhere physically. That's my destination. But it may not be that you're going to go anywhere physically. But what's the treasure that you're actually looking for? You have treasure within yourself that maybe you haven't even seen, that you've let somebody else to decide if you've had treasure or value or not. But no, you have it. So put an X on it wherever it lies in you, because something that you do all the time, somebody else cannot do. I learned that myself. But the biggest treasure is freedom. Sometimes it's freedom from our own thoughts. Sometimes it's freedom from obligations. Sometimes, and I'm not saying a commitment and obligation are the same thing. I have commitments, what I'm committed to do. In Spanish, they call it dedicated, what I'm dedicated to doing. So for me, that's freedom, because I love what I get to do. Freedom to know myself, freedom for you to know yourself, freedom to choose, freedom to create, freedom to love, freedom to grow, freedom to travel through uncharted territory of this life without needing someone else to tell you who you are or where you're supposed to go. This map belongs to you, and that adventure is yours. So the destination is freedom. Not freedom from life, not freedom from uncertainty, not freedom from difficult people or difficult experiences, because those things are out there too. But freedom to navigate your own life consciously. Freedom to question the map, freedom to change the direction, freedom to discover your gifts, freedom to choose what belongs on your map and what doesn't. So freedom to move through uncharted territory without needing to know every turn before you take the next one. Not because the goal was never to create the map that guarantees you'll never get lost, because you will get lost sometimes, Jen. I get lost sometimes. The goal is to know yourself well enough to navigate when the road changes. Yes, exactly. Creating the life we want to live. Yeah, not letting anybody else demean us, because we talked about something the other day that was self-depreciating. John London was saying it. I can't remember exactly what it pertained to, but your belief system is your internal map, and your nervous system is part of your navigation system. Your nervous system, acknowledging your nervous system. That was so helpful to me when I acknowledged my nervous system. What those triggers were. Some of us have what they call triggers when we have fears. And we understand what the trigger to that fear is. And it's like when you're getting shot and you go, or when you think you're going to get shot. And that's what our central nervous system, when they say trigger, your central nervous system is doing just the same thing that it would do if you had somebody pointing a gun at you. You're not going to breathe, because you're like, and your heart might get race fast, and your stomach might cringe and knot up. So this is what happens when in learning to identify those triggers, we can see, where did this trigger come from? Is this happening today? So it's not denying your reality, but is it happening today? So your experience is how you helped you draw the original lines that you've drawn, but you have the pen now. So put that X on the map to freedom. So we're going to breathe that in right now. Breathe in the freedom in. What does that look like? How would you create freedom? Is there anything you're doing right now that you don't want to be doing? And how could you not be doing that? We have to do something different to get something different. I know I had to. And that's the way that we create the lives that we want, is by not trying to strategize the life we don't want, but learning what I do want. And sometimes we do look at what we don't want to create what we do want, and quit giving energy to what we don't want so that we can go towards the direction of our dreams, as Thoreau says. Half Hawk Man, can I tell you a quick joke? What's the most popular greeting at a psychiatrist convention? You're fine, how am I? That sounds like the codependent convention too, because that's the way the codependents do. A lot of people think codependency means that you depend on another person for money, for that material stuff, but that's not what it is. A codependent depends on somebody for validation, somebody to tell them they're enough. So that they keep trying to get approval. You know, I have people telling me they're people pleasing. People pleasing is a sign that somebody's trying to get approval. So some of us grew up maybe with a parent that didn't approve of us. So we go through navigating, or not navigating, but strategizing in life, trying to get somebody to approve of us and feeling like I can never get somebody to approve of me. I keep trying. I know I used to feel that way. So like I said, I'm a mindset coach. If you want one-on-ones with me, there's my information in the description box, or if you want to be part of my program, or join me on my Facebook group coaching meetings on Zoom twice a month on Thursday nights. Then give me an email or what have you, or follow on Facebook. Half Hawk Man. In codependency, your mental map may equate love with rescuing, pleasing, or controlling others, shaping unhealthy boundaries. And exactly. And I had that. All right. Y'all ready to breathe, darlings? What we do, if you're new here and you haven't breathed with us before, the breath is so powerful. When I learned martial arts, that was one of the first things. When I got sober, I took karate also to make sure that I stayed sober. Like I said, I've been sober 29 years now. But I took martial arts because I had to make sure, because I did not want to drink again against my will. I didn't want to smoke weed again against my will. I didn't want to do anything because I wanted to raise my kids. You know, so that's what I wanted to do, was raise my kids. So we're going to take a deep breath in. We don't realize how valuable and important that breath is. The breath in martial arts gives you perseverance. It gives you divine mind, so that you know where, we broke boards, we broke bricks, so that we know where to hit the boards. We know where to hit the bricks because we have a focus. Your breath gives you a focus. See, when those triggers come, we're like out of focus, right? Because when you can't get oxygen to your brain, you get out of focus. And that's what happens with trauma. Oh, that's good, half hawk, half man. Yes. Karate teaches you a lot about patience and about these kind of things, and about control, inner control, not outer control, inner control. So that's what it taught me anyway. And so learning how divine that breath is and that, but also when I did go to therapy, I had to learn to breathe so that I could regulate my central nervous system, so that I could feel safe. Because you can feel safe with this breath. This is why when people suffer and struggle with anxiety, that they're given breathing exercises. Because anxiety does cause your heart to beat fast. It causes your central nervous system to have problems. And so let's do the breathing. We're going to do 5, but I encourage you to practice these on your own too. So I don't do all the box breath and all of this, the counting on the breath in, and then the counting while you hold your breath, and the counting on the breath out. I keep things simple here, y'all. So we're just only going to count the breath in, and that's 4 counts, okay? You're struggling with your kids being grown up and gone. Ah, good. Yeah, I don't miss it. I do miss my kids. I would love, there's certain times in the life that I miss my kids, but I'm glad that my daughter is grown and she's doing so good, and I'm so proud of her. And Yeah. So now it's my turn. It's my turn to go on adventures now because I didn't know the possibilities, Jen, of my adventures that I could actually physically go on. I didn't know that before I had kids. I lived in my Texas town and did all the things that it was expected of me until I didn't. And then, it was when I got sober that I started realizing I was sober for 7 years before I realized there was codependency. And then I had to work on my codependency, the getting over my coping. I was able to heal and have better, healthier, and coping skills with working on the addiction. But then with the codependency, I learned how to see myself through my own eyes instead of the eyes of other people. And then, with the grief, I lost my son. Well, Jen, you lost your daughter too. And so with the grief, I learned to walk with it in grace, you know. And so we learned something. These things can be a catalyst for our growth if we choose. So choose freedom on your map today as we take these breaths in. So you're going to take that deep breath in. Fill up your tummy just like you did when you were a little kid. Y'all got those pictures of when you're a little kid and your tummy's just out there and you're just like, I'm here, y'all. So fill up your tummy and then your heart is open, your shoulders are up. When we took karate and I taught karate to little kids, it was like you look smarter when your shoulders are up. We look defeated when our shoulders are down. So when you're motivating, we're motivated. If our shoulders are up, we're going to be more motivated than if we're shrunk. So it's about learning our body and our body language and what our body is telling us instead of reading everybody else's body language. So going within, being comfortable in your own skin. So take that deep breath in. And this is what happens. Then we're going to hold it for 4 counts if you can, but just do your best. If you can't hold it for 4 counts, that's okay. 4 counts. And then holding that idea of freedom. What does freedom look like for you? What does freedom look like for you? Realistically, just today, what was freedom look like in this breath? You can't take yesterday's breath today, tomorrow's breath today. And then release gently and slowly out of your mouth. There's the Grinch. We're going to do this 5 times, okay? So here we grow. All right, breath 1, right? Take a deep breath in. Hold it. And release. Breathe. Hold it. Release. You're safe right this moment. Take a deep breath in. Hold it. Release. Just 2 more. Breathe. Hold it. Release. Breathe. Hold it. And release. All right, is Epic, are you still here? Yes, the bird loves the breathing. It does calm the nervous system, reduce stress. It helps us to regulate and regenerate. Regulate, and that helps us get in our divine mind, open up the hypothalamus, pituitary, and pineal glands. See, I told y'all Grinch would steal my tissue. There goes Grinch. Grinch will steal this tissue and put it in his cage. Watch this. Y'all couldn't see it. Well, he sure did. All right. Thank you so much, Marshall. I'm so glad that you stayed. If this content resonated with you, I ask you to please like and subscribe, and I will be back here tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. And we'll have a topic for next week. Any ideas, y'all, for our next week topic? You know, because what we do is we pick a topic and then we keep expanding upon it, because growth isn't a one and done and in one measure. Growth is a process. Thank you so much for joining today, Half Hawk, Half Man. If you like this content, I hope that you subscribe to this channel and hit that like button. And I hope that you all have a wonderful day, and that, you know, now that we've breathed, that you feel, you know, we breathe, that you feel divinely connected and wholly directed. And I mean like WHOLLY, because you are whole, you were born whole, and we were here to remember who we are. Okay? So I hope that you remember who you are today and have a beautiful day. Epic, thank you so much for moderating today. I appreciate you, Kim. And if you're still here, I appreciate you too. And I love you all. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow night on Monday. If you have any ideas for the topic, you can feel free to reach out to me by email if you want, in the description box. Or if you want one-on-one coaching or what have you, then you can feel free to reach out to me there. Thank y'all so much for all the stuff taken off there on the side. I appreciate it, and I love y'all very much, and I hope you have a super Sunday. Okay? And I'll see you tomorrow night. Okay.